All right, welcome back, everybody. We spared the people on the CD of that joke. That was a pretty good one. If I do say, best joke I ever told. Yeah, right. I do like the one. We told one about the genie earlier. Here's a short one. This addict is walking along, and he. Well, I better make it. Can I make it about an addict? He's walking along the beach, and he finds this lamp, and he rubs it off, and a genie pops out of it, and the genie says, "Thank you for freeing me from this lamp." He says, "For freeing me from 1,000 years of captivity, you get 2 wishes, anything you want." This guy's an addict. He thinks about it for a minute, and he says, "I want a jar of cocaine." But he says, "I want one that will never be empty." And so, poof, he's got this jar in his hand, and he dumps half of it out, and it's full again, and he dumps half of it out, and it's full again, and he dumps half of it out, and it's full again. He's like, "Wow, this is fantastic." And the genie says, "Well, good, I'm glad you like it." And he says, "What would you like for your second wish?" And the guy thinks about it for a minute, and he goes, "Better give me another one of these." If you're one of us, that joke makes sense. It's like, just in case. The Al-Anons, when you tell that joke, they look at you like, why would you do that? Yeah. That is so stupid. We tried to roll through resentment, and we just can't. We tried to roll through the whole inventory process. You just can't do it, in that amount of time. And I think I'd rather spend less time on 5, 6, and 7 and be sure that we really do 4. Now, we brought up one thing is, once you recognize the need to do an inventory like this, how do you find somebody that's checked out on doing an inventory like this? I had a conversation with somebody during the break about, and he was like, "Yeah, I need to do this kind of an inventory, but I don't know where to, who to read that to, and I look around, and there's people in this room, and there's options available. And then another thing is to become the guy that can hear that kind of an inventory, and we can trade inventory with each other. But
tell them your experience on it being a confession.
Well, my first inventory was just a confession, and my sponsor basically felt like that his job was, I write the 4th step inventory. Remember I said that we skipped right over to the 3rd step prayer, and then it was like, I wrote the people I was mad at and my fears and my sex, just the stuff from my sex history that I felt shame about. And he sat there and I read it to him, and he didn't really say a word, and at the very end of it he said, "You're a very selfish person." And I'm like, okay, and we burned it. I won't say that I didn't get anything out of that, because it was just barely enough to save my life. I stayed sober for a long time after that. And believe me, that's another thing I didn't want to forget to mention. There are a lot of people out there staying sober off of imperfect programs and imperfect sponsorship. If you wait until you can do this thing perfectly, it's not going to happen. And I have said many times that if the new guy and the sponsor are giving it their best shot, I really feel like God takes up a lot of slack. Now, if I'm trying to get away, because he needs to, because we don't wait till we're and the stuff I'm giving sponsees now is different from what I was giving them 3 years or 5 years or 7 years ago. So as we tend to transmit what's been transmitted to us, so it's a moving target. But we are pretty technical about the way it goes through here. You'll hear us talking about some other terms during this thing, like you hear me say a lot, is it possible that? My sponsorship lineage, we use this thing called the path of consideration. And a lot of times when we're working with each other, we work off the concept of spiritual consent. When I have a group of people, like the group of guys that meet, the best AA I've ever been involved in meets at my kitchen table on Thursday nights, and we all have spiritual consent with each other. And when you establish spiritual consent, if Dave and I establish spiritual consent with each other, what I'd be saying is, you've got the right to call me on anything you see me doing, whether it hurts my feelings or not. My sponsorship lineage believes that I'd rather step on your toes than stand on your grave. And we can kill our pals in AA by not calling each other on behavior we see each other doing. And what happens is, in untreated alcoholism, we tend to get with people that are doing the same thing. Gamblers get with gamblers, and skirt chasers get with skirt chasers, and we say, "How am I doing?" And you say, "You're doing fine," right? You don't call me on my stuff, I won't call you on your stuff. You're not drinking, you're doing fine. Nod your head if you agree with me, we're doing fine, right? and that's the way it goes. And we can literally kill each other. That's the way we stay in untreated alcoholism. And if I get around somebody that's not rolling the way I roll, then I don't roll with them anymore. I'm looking for people. So that's where the spiritual, and part of spiritual consent is this thing we call the path of consideration, where rather than saying, I think you're messing up this way, we'll say, I'd like to offer something for your consideration. Is it possible that blank? And the amazing thing, we talked earlier about the ego going into self-defense. In the path of path of consideration, the really frustrating part about that is when somebody offers me a consideration, guess what I get to say? Thank you. Oh, that feels so wimpy. Because otherwise, if you call me on something, if you give me a consideration, what you're going to hear is my ego telling you why that's not the case, why what you're saying doesn't apply to me, and why you are way off. If you understood how complex and complicated my situation was, you'd be embarrassed to have even said that to me. But I don't get to say all that. I just get to go, thank you. And then I get to go consider it. And it's amazing how 20 minutes or 24 hours later, I'm going, they're spot on. They're exactly right. Because, and we had one where we had a guy that would come in, we report in, we do a check-in with the circle and triangle. I'm going to work this in now because otherwise I'll forget to say it. This stamp we do in the front of the book with the circle and triangle, part of my sponsorship lineage is when we check in with our sponsor, we'll do a quick circle and triangle check-in. And when you call in, he'll say, he used to say, where are you at with the circle and triangle? Such a crybaby. I can't even think about Mark without just... and what we do is, there's three sides to that triangle. It's unity, service, and recovery. Unity is the fellowship, service is service, and recovery is the steps. And when you say, where are you at with the circle and triangle, I can check in with those three areas pretty quickly. I can go, okay, unity, let's see, in the fellowship, I went to the Monday night meeting over at Club 101. I went to Tuesday night primary purpose group. I had the Thursday night meeting at the house, and I went to the Saturday morning men's meeting. That's where I'm at with the fellowship for this week. As far as service goes, I've sponsored an X number of guys. I heard 3 inventories this week, and I went out to the ranch, the treatment center, and gave a first step talk on Monday afternoon. And then whatever it is. And then as far as recovery goes, the steps, I've got some amends that I need to make an approach on, and I did maybe 2 evening reviews this week. I've been really weak in evening review, and maybe 4 morning meditations, and see how in a pretty short order you can draw a pretty good bead on where I'm at in my program by checking in with the circle and triangle. So that's one of the reasons I love the circle and triangle. That's why we work with it. So I've eaten up 8 minutes already, but what we're going to try to talk about now is finish the inventory process and then talk about 5, 6, and 7. And I think we can do that in this session, but I got to move. In the fear inventory, once we finish and we didn't really spend a lot of time on the 4th column, but I think we got the idea of it down, that, where the sponsor is going to point out selfishness, self-seeking, dishonesty, and fear in the 4th column, in these resentments. Once we've done the sick man exercise, the sponsor is going to show me how to look at this from an entirely different angle. Where have I been? Well, so then it rolls into fear. Now keep in mind, what did it say we were looking for manifestations of in the 4th step? Self, right? So the second most common manifestation of self, how does my selfishness and self-centeredness show up, is in fear, right? Because it's usually not fear of what's going to happen to somebody that doesn't have anything to do with me, right? There's going to be
not spiders and snakes.
It's going to be some level of self-centered fear, and you can put spiders and snakes on it. But I see people doing fear inventories. There were some people in our hometown of Austin that were doing these fear inventories that were just these massive, 9-week fear inventories where they would, you write down everything that you fear, and then as you go through the day, I want you to write down every time you're fearful. And what happens is, if we're not careful, Katie said it, self craves knowledge. Self craves information, and sometimes what can happen is self wants to do enough of a fear inventory. If I can just gather enough information about my fears, I'll be able to manage this. Does that make sense? That's not getting out of self. That is an exercise focused on self, and a life run on self-will. It's me trying to gather enough information about my fears that I'll be able to handle them, and then I won't have them. I'll say this prayer and I'll do that information, and I'll click my heels, and I'll be back in Kansas. That's not the way the fear inventory rolls. And none of the fear inventories I've seen follow this process the way it's laid out in the book, because look how simple it is. Notice that the word fear, this is the bottom of page 67. I'm going to blow your mind with this 1936 dictionary here in just a minute. This is the only one I'm going to read probably during the weekend, but notice that the word fear is bracketed alongside, I can't do this and look it up in my...
I'll read it. Notice the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer, and the wife. This short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it.
Okay, stop right there. We're at Primary Purpose Group one night, and we used a 1936 dictionary to look up what words might have meant at the time we were doing it. We get this part right here, and it says, fear was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. Some of y'all might know this, but I had an idea what shot through with fear. Man, I had this picture of something like a heavy piece of fabric that had been shot or something. I mean, I don't know. But for some reason, I heard myself saying, look up shot. The lady gets the dictionary out, and it says, woven with warp and weft thread of different colors, causing the fabric to change in tint according to the viewpoint. And we called it a Cheech and Chong moment. Mark used to call them Cheech and Chong moments, where the whole room kind of went, whoa. Because shot didn't mean at all what I thought it meant. What it's saying, it's like a sharkskin suit, where the threads of different colors are woven through. So fear is woven through the fabric of my life, and it can change the way things look depending on how I'm looking at them. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's different. Fear set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. But did not we ourselves set the ball rolling? This falls under the category of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And my favorite example is, I used to be wildly insecure as a teenage boy, and if I had a girlfriend, I didn't want her going anywhere because I was sure she was going to meet somebody that deserved her more than I did. So you think, you can't go to the mall, you can't go out with your friends, you definitely can't go to a party, you can't, you know what I'm saying? And I don't want you doing anything. In fact, when we're around other people, don't even talk to anybody else, because it scares me, and what happens is people aren't going to hold up in that kind of relationship very long. And when she splits, because I'm sure she's going to leave me if she gets out. And when she finally can't take it anymore and she leaves, what do I tell myself?
See?
I knew it. I was right all the time. Yep, she dumped me just like I said. But see how my fear set into motion trains of circumstances which brought me misfortune that I felt I didn't deserve. But did not we ourselves set the ball rolling? Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. Now, I used to read that line and go, whatever. Fear ought to be classed with stealing. Is that a little wishy-washy for anybody else? Bob? Well, one time Bob was talking about it, and he said, I was in the hospital with this old man that was dying, an old-timer in AA, and he said, Bob, when you get in the home stretch of life and you're looking back over your life, he says, it's not the mistakes I made that I deeply regret. It's the things that I was afraid to try. And in that way, fear robs me of experience. Fear robs me of the depth of relationship I could have had. Fear can rob me of the career that I could have had. Fear can rob me of the relationship with my children that I could have had. Fear keeps me from doing any kind of stretch because I'm scared I'm going to fall on my face or get hurt. So in that way, fear ought to be classed with stealing. Does that put some meat on that bone a little bit? And it says, it seems to cause more trouble. Now listen to this, how simple the fear inventory is. Remember when it promised me clear-cut directions? It says, we reviewed our fears thoroughly. Bam. We put them on paper, even though we had no resentment in connection with them. Stop right there. On one side of a piece of paper, write down what my fears are. I'm afraid of going broke. I'm afraid of not staying sober. I'm afraid of getting a divorce. I'm afraid I'm going to be embarrassed in the AA community. I'm afraid I'm going to screw up. I'm afraid I'm going to get cancer. I'm afraid my kids are going to die or something bad is going to happen to them. I'm afraid of this. And write down the list, right? Write down all these things. I think I just did a little public fear inventory there. Yeah. And then what does it say? After we've written that list, it says, we ask ourselves why we had them. That's funny because I may feel differently about this next year, but right now I'll let them consider why they think they have them. But it's usually not too accurate, but I like to at least let this guy take a minute to think about why he has this fear. But the book tells me the answer in the next sentence, and it's not what I would have ever put down. Because remember what? We're looking for manifestations of self in this fear inventory. And look at what it says. It says, wasn't it because self-reliance failed me? Well, this is pretty weird. Self-reliance means reliance upon self. Right? That's that, we're referring back to the deal in step 3 again now. That on that basis, I'm in constant collision with something or somebody. Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us once had great self-confidence, right? But it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other problem. Damn. And then it says when it made us cocky, it was worse. That fear thing where you go, I ain't scared of nothing or nobody. Well, who was it? Was it Bob? They talked about doing a fear inventory, and the guy he's like, I ain't scared of nothing. I don't have any fears. And he goes, really? How interesting. He goes, are you afraid of snakes? He goes, well, yeah, everybody's afraid of snakes. And he's like, are you afraid of getting a divorce? Well, yeah, I'm afraid. Are you afraid of going broke? Well, yeah, everybody's afraid of going broke, and stuff. And he's like, are you afraid of that people are going to make fun of you or talk about you behind your back? He's like, well, yeah, and the guy ran down the whole list, and at the end of it, the guy goes, can I ask you something? Is there anything that you're not afraid of? But that's what Mark used to talk about, being asleep, dreaming that I'm awake. And that's how asleep I can walk around, because what you're going to hear from me is I ain't afraid of nothing. But that's what it's talking about when it says when it made us cocky. It was worse. Perhaps there's a better way. We think so. Right here on the side of my book, it says restates step 3. Here's another one of those hubs that goes back to the hub city that goes back to there. It says, for we are now on a different basis. I didn't get to talk about this one, Katie. Some of the words that become interesting to me as I go through the book, one I've been looking at in the last 2 or 3 years has been the word basis. It's in the book a lot. Did I talk about this yet? Basis, when you look it up in this dictionary, it means the underlying principle or the foundation of something. Now remember when it says, I have to be convinced that my life run on self-will can hardly be a success. On that basis, the basis that Charlie's in charge and I'm going to take care of everything, it says on that basis, I'm constantly in collision. So when the underlying principle in my life is that I'm running things, I'm in constant collision with something or somebody. We make this deal in step 3 that I'm out of the God business. I am no longer in management. And over here it says, for we're now on a different basis. Right? What is the new basis? What is the new underlying principle of life? It says the basis of trusting and relying upon this power. We're not relying on my power anymore because I keep hitting the wall with that. What if we really did try to do this deal where it says, God, you're going to have to take care of this thing. This is a management level decision and I am no longer in management, And so what happens is, on this new basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God, we trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. Here's what I do in a fear inventory. When I sit down with the guy, once he's written the list down and he tells me all the things he's afraid of, I say, listen, here's the way it shows up to me. When we're talking about self-reliance, there's a little sphere in my life of control, of the things that I can control. I can control whether I'm going to get up and go to the bathroom. I can control how I'm going to have my coffee. I can control probably a lot less than I think I can, but I can, I can control what time I'm going to go to bed. And those things, guess what? None of that stuff scares me. right? But there are things that fall outside of my area of control that at some level, even though I'm on the basis of running everything, this basis that I'm in charge of everything, at some level, I know I can't control these things. These things that fall outside my area of control, does that make sense? Those things scare me, right? If I'm running everything and I know somehow that cancer is a little above my pay scale, I'm pretty good, but I can't control whether or not I'm going to get cancer or anybody I love is going to get cancer. I can't, how that scares me. Because if the only thing I got is me running everything and I run up against something that I can't handle, I got to push that down. I got to put that back to where I don't think about it. I got to compartmentalize it. I got to push it away because it scares me a little bit, And so what I do when I sit down with the guy, and if David just written out his fear list, we'd sit down and go, you know what? All these things you put on your fear list, let's look at them. Cancer, inside your area of control or outside your area of control? And he'd go, outside. Going broke, inside or outside? That's outside my area of control. Whether or not this marriage is going to last forever, pretty much outside my area of control. Whether or not I'm going to go, you see how, and right down the list, when you sit with somebody and you go down I see that nearly all of the fears are things that are outside my area of control. And that's what it's saying when it says we're now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. This little sphere is finite. It only covers so much ground. Now, though, if I got this new basis that God's taking care of everything, He can handle all that stuff that's outside my area of control. I don't have to be in management anymore. I can just go, you know what? I'm going to do my little deal. I'm going to sponsor my guys. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to be in this marriage. I'm going to try to be the best guy I know how to be. And whether or not my people are going to be healthy or not, it's going to have to be God business. How long, whether I have money or don't have money, who's in my life, who's not in my life, how long I get to be on this planet. It's all God stuff. I had this talk with Mark the night before he died. He sat there at my kitchen table and said, I want to go out like my heroes. I want to be sponsoring guys. I want to be in the work. I don't think he meant tomorrow, but he left that day. That was February 18th of last year. February 19th he died. But he went out just the way he said he wanted to go, in the work and sponsoring guys and doing the deal, and he wasn't afraid for a minute. The lady that was with him when he died said he was never scared for a second. Because that was one of the things that worried. I said, was he scared on the way to the hospital? She said, he never acted scared at all. In fact, he turned to her and said, well, this isn't the way we thought the weekend was going to go, is it? And, and that was about it. And that was when they told him, you're taking your last breaths. And, it was, that was it. He was like, in fact, he had said in talks, the first talk we had, he said he had some questions for God. And he said, when I leave this body, I wish to ask him a few things when I get up there. But I get a little emotional when I think about it. But this thing about fear, does that make sense? About that on self-reliance, I can't handle this stuff, and that's why it scares me. That's what I'm trying to point out to this guy in a fear inventory. It is a manifestation of self. This is another way that self shows up. Does that make sense? Just to the extent that we do as we think God would have us and humbly rely on Him, does He enable us to match calamity with serenity. We never apologize to anyone for depending on our Creator. We can laugh at those that think spirituality is the way of weakness. Paradoxically, is the way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let God demonstrate through us what He can do. Here's another one that came out of the dictionary and blew me away. You know what demonstrate means? Emmett Fox talks a lot about your demonstration. If you do this stuff, you'll make your demonstration. To demonstrate, if you look it up in this old dictionary, it says to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt. To prove to the point that the opposite viewpoint is rendered absurd. Is that heavy? So what it's saying is if I'll try this exercise, if I'll rely on God and trust that if I stay close to Him and perform His work well, He'll take care of what I need, God will demonstrate. He will prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that this God thing works. Not only will He prove it, but He'll prove it to the point that the opposite viewpoint will look absurd. Once we've tried this experiment for a while, running on God power, you look back and you go, man, the idea of me running it as opposed to Him running it is ridiculous. That's why I kept crashing into the wall. That's why I kept getting so uncomfortable that eventually the idea of getting loaded again started looking like a pretty good idea. It's a big relief to get out of management. Just go, I'm just going to, that is above my pay grade. There's a lot of stuff that comes to me and I'm like, that's a management level decision there. I'm not in management anymore, and, so there's an interesting thing here. It says, instead we let God demonstrate through us we can do. We ask Him. Now here's a clue. When you're going through the big book, if it says we ask, it's usually a prayer. If it says we ask Him or we ask God, it's always a prayer. And it says here, we ask God to remove our fear and direct our attention to what He would have us be. At once, we commence to outgrow fear. That's the whole fear inventory exercise. Right? The second of the 3 inventories we do in the 4th step is that one on fear. Does that make sense? How are we doing on time?
Good. I'm going to just touch on some things on the fear. One of the other terms that Mark turned us on to was a thing called current agnosticism. And I never understood the chapter We Agnostics. To be honest with you, I never touched it because I always believed in God. And so I just felt it was a chapter in the book that wasn't really even necessary for me. I mean, go figure, what do you know that you don't know? And so Mark would talk about current agnosticism is where we do not believe that God will take care of us. I think it manifests a lot of times in people who don't have a relationship. That I'll never have a relationship. I'm always going to be the one that's never in a relationship. That's always the current agnosticism. Or they don't have the job that they love. I'm never going to have a job I love. I'm always going to be in this hellhole of a place, blah, blah, blah. All these things are current agnosticisms where we don't believe that God will, in fact, take care of us. Mm-hmm. And what we do is we end up making our God so small, and that's my experience. I made God so small because I was always on self-reliance. And so when we, once the drink problem has been removed in our lineage, we take people through what we call current agnosticism. We have you write down a list of the things that you don't believe God can, in fact, take care of for you. It's very interesting.
Or areas of your life that you're not taking to God.
Right. And so it says, one of the things about fear, I think, that is so important is, and Charlie touched on a lot of these things, is fear is not the root of our problem. Selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of our problem. It's driven by 100 forms of fear. It says 100 forms of fear. It could have said 1,000 forms of fear. Finding out those 1,000 forms is still not going to fix the fear problem. God gave us fear as a natural human emotion. We're supposed to be afraid if the house is on fire. We're supposed to know to run out of the house if it's on fire. We're supposed to know that if it's a dark alley, I probably shouldn't go down there. Women are supposed to sense a predator in the room. You know what I mean? We have intuition. We have these notions of something's not right here, right? It's a God-given feeling. But what we end up doing with it is when it is self-centered, we are either paralyzed or motivated. See, if the house is on fire, I'm motivated to run. If I haven't paid the IRS in 3 years and I get a letter from the IRS, I cannot open the envelope because I'm paralyzed by the fear. See how, it's still fear. It's just when it went up here what it did. And so, once again, when it says, where did we set the ball rolling? It's going to always tie it back into the promise. And what is the promise? Our problems are of our own making. That sounds to most people like not a great promise. People want to read the promises of the big book and fear will fall from us and all these wonderful things. My problems are of Katie's own making. Please, Marty, point out, what did I do here that I don't see? I want to be free of this pain. I don't know about you guys, but I've lived in the bedevilments. I have been in a bedroom where my son would open the door and I'd go, shut the door. Just leave me alone. I can't take life anymore. That is a miserable place to be. And I think we've all been there at some point on some level. You know what I mean? And I hate the bedevilment so badly that I beg my sponsor, I'm not going to argue with her. Show me where I set the ball rolling. Please point these things out to me. I called her one day last week, and this is one I didn't even see. Once again, I'm blinded to my own level of self-centeredness. I say to her, Marty, listen. Oh, have I already told you about the Oklahoma deal? No. I said, Marty, listen, I'm going to Oklahoma to speak, and Charlie can't come, and these things are just no fun to do on your own. That's just what I said, right? On the machine. Sounds good. I was hoping she'd say she wanted to go. Oh, God love my sponsor. She calls me back, and she goes, leaves me a message. She goes, you know, Katie, as your sponsor and your very dear friend, it is my job to point out selfishness and self-centeredness. I just want you to hear how that sounded to me. It basically said, Charlie can't go, so I'm looking at maybe inviting you, and I definitely don't want to be there by myself, so I really do need you to be there with me. So you're basically third on my list. Would you like to go? I didn't hear it that way. She said, what would have happened if you would have called me and just said, hey, man, I got an opportunity for you to go to Oklahoma with me. You want to go? Would have made her feel pretty special, wouldn't it? Instead, it's like, Charlie can't go, and I don't want to go alone. You want to go with me? You know, I've asked 4 other people, they can't go. You're 5th, but you're 5th. You mind? See, all that stuff can stay in my head. It's still my thought process. But I have no idea how that affects you. Because I'm not usually thinking about you. I just want you to go with me.
Tell me about how when you used to have one of your kids do something for you, you'd say, I'm going to let you.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to let you have that.
Katie, you had a way with her kids where sometimes she'd go, I'm going to let you fill my coffee cup up for me. I'm going to let you put that in the pantry or something, you know. And they were like, thanks.
Thanks,
you know?
Mom. I appreciate you letting me do that.
That's where she's like, that really does sound a little self-centered, doesn't it? It's like, would you please put this in the pantry? You know, and they're like, yes, Mom, I'd be happy to.
Yeah.
Stuff like, it's funny how we can have such a self-centered take on it.
Oh, the sense of entitlement we have is pretty amazing. You know, it's once again, it's in my DNA. We alcoholics are outright mental defects, full flight from reality, and cannot differentiate the true from the false, drunk or sober. See, I always thought everything meant just when I was drinking. But if the drink is but a symptom, this book is all written about me sober too. So it's pretty interesting. Well, then the other thing Bob gave us a ton of stuff. And once again, like I said, man, we get these CDs. You listen to them over and over. It's as if I said to you, you're going to go to France in a month, and the only way you're going to learn the language is through these CDs. You got 1 month to, really beef up on them. That's the same thing we did with these CDs. I mean, these tapers, the fact that they're willing to go and sit through this and listen to these, speakers speak. This is a tool you don't want to go without. What you'll get in this weekend is one thing. You get the CDs. You will have amazing. I've sat through so many of these deals and I've listened to the CDs and gone, my God, I was there and I didn't hear that. And I heard it through the CDs. They're a wonderful gift. Bob said, there's a big difference between faith and trust. Trust is an action. It comes after you've taken the step of faith, right? And so, people say you can't have faith without fear or whatever. You darn sure can.
You can't have fear with faith.
You can have...
People say, you can't have fear and faith.
Yeah, you sure can. And, I know that there's a God, but I'm scared to death right now because I don't know where I'm going with this deal, right? And so Bob said, well, imagine that you're at the circus and there's a guy and he's going to get in the wheelbarrow and he's going to go across a tightrope and they're shining the light on him and you're thinking, oh my gosh, well, it's the circus and he's done this 1,000 times. It looks pretty scary, but I guess he's going to do it. And all of a sudden, the spotlight comes down and shines on you. And they say, you know what? Change of plans. We want you to get in the wheelbarrow.
That's trust.
Yeah. That's where I'm God Almighty. And so he goes, yeah, I love him. God, I love him. And and that's when you say to yourself, that's trust. So, oh, stop it. But, but that's the difference between watching and having faith that the guy's going to go across the wheelbarrow, right? But when they want you to get in it, now all of a sudden I got to switch that to trust.
Now about sex.
That guy's going to get across it. So then the other thing is, there's another part where it says, there's promises in the fear inventory, and it says he enables us to match calamity with serenity. And what that is, and I love to point this out to my sponsees, is when all of a sudden what used to be insanity, they have a level of clarity through it. And that's where you go, see, you're matching calamity with serenity. You finally are getting the idea of how this deal works. And then Charlie said the fear prayer. And then the other thing now is, honey, did you restart that over?
Nope.
Oh, good. So are we going to do the sex inventory?
And then we're going to blast through 5, 6, and 7.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I can't spend a lot of time on sex inventory.
But I do want to say one thing about the sex inventory. Believe it or not, it is a sex inventory with an emphasis on harms to others. Now, this is a little bit interesting on how people do this. Really, if you're going to do your 8-step harms list, I do it in 2 different events. I do keep a sex inventory pretty geared on sex, which is really the harms. It's not so much the physical act of sex, although there can be a tremendous amount of shame as to how far down the scope we've gone sexually. And there can be a lot of the act of is necessary. But it can also be just the emotional infidelity of where we've drawn lines and whatever. But there are 9 questions that are asked. And once again, a lot of people have a sex inventory where they put the sex inventory and they do it in 4 columns. And the book does not reflect a 4-column inventory. It has 9 questions here.
What we're looking for is manifestations of self-centeredness when the sexual instinct is aroused. Mm-hmm. Because like Katie was saying earlier, there is no other area of my life where I'm more selfish than in the sexual arena. Because that's the place where I'm liable to compromise my values. I'm liable to say something that's not true. I'm liable to manipulate or self-seek and do things to get things to go my way. And self manifests itself in that sexual arena heavily.
And I think, too, another thing, when we're always pointing out the things that we learned in open discussion meetings, once again, nobody was ill-intentioned. Don't ever hear us say that. But you do hear a lot of stuff in AA that's not true, and that's don't have a relationship for your first year. It's like, where in the world did that come from? I told you, I had 10 minutes sober when I met Joe, and, he had 6 years, and we were married 20 years. Thank God somebody wasn't saying, don't do this. It says, on page 69, it says, we want to stay out of this controversy. I do not get to be the arbiter of your sex life, period. As a matter of fact, if you're sleeping with 3 people a day, I don't get to give my moral values on you. As a matter of fact, if I do see that you can't stay sober, we get to talk a bit about that. If I do say that you're having trouble staying sober, sleeping with 3 people a day. But the truth of the matter is I cannot put my moral values on you. And I'm telling you, I've seen people in AA do it, and it's a darn shame, especially if they're a rigid, no-sex person. You're taking this brand-new guy in. I remember this one gal that I sponsor that's gay, and, for me to keep her out of a relationship 3 a day was a task. You know what I mean? And finally, we got her to where she's got a tremendous amount of integrity behind her sex. But it was because she walked out of it. I didn't do this. I said, man, I hope I can just keep you out of the hay. But God darn, I was having trouble.
We had another friend that got divorced after 25 years of marriage, and her sponsor told her she couldn't sleep with anybody until they were married.
Yeah.
As a 50-year-old woman,
That's not a good thing.
It's like, anybody want to sponsor me other than her?
But one of the other things too is it says when we're doing this inventory, there's another piece of the work that sometimes we tend to forget, and that's where we are are shaping a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life, I need to have a paragraph as to what my sane and sound ideal looks like. It's not what I want him to look like. It's what I want it to look like.
And that's it. I mean, that's the deal. We're not trying to put my sexual values on somebody. You don't get in trouble when you violate my sexual values. You get in trouble when you violate your own values. And when we do stuff that compromises my own beliefs. And that's when I feel bad, is when I do stuff that's outside my value system. But I'm never going to know in advance whether I'm about to violate my standards if I've never established my standards. And that's what the book is talking about. It says in this way, we try to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. We go through there, and like Katie said, we put it all down. It talks about the spirit we take into this in the first long paragraph there, where it's saying, some people think this way, some people think, all or nothing. Some people, it says, we want to stay out of this controversy. We'd hardly be human if we didn't have sex problems. What can we do about them? And here comes those 9 questions. It says, we reviewed our conduct over the years past. Where had I been selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate? And I put these all in, if I'm going to do columns, it would be like, whom had I hurt? Where had I been selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate? Did I unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Right? And then it says, where was I at fault? What should I have done instead? That would be what an inventory would look like for me. And it says, we got this all down on paper and looked at it. And that way I'm trying to say, how do I want to be? Right? And it can be a moving target. And I've said, and Katie doesn't always agree with this, but I sponsor a lot of guys, and the sane and sound ideal for a 60-year-old married man is going to be different from the sane and sound ideal for a 21-year-old good-looking college student. I've seen, these guys, they're not going to they're going to have different ideals, different values, different behaviors are going to be okay, but we need to sit down with them and let them, but, I had one guy, how can I say this? This one particular good-looking college kid that I was sponsoring, this guy, could just, he got a lot of attention, let's just say that. And in his inventory, he was saying, so-and-so, I did this, and then he was like, I'm going to use the word, jerk. He says, I was a jerk to her, and then the next one, I was a jerk to her, and then this one, I was a jerk to her. And it's funny, because after we did about 8 or 10 of those, I said, all right, let me ask you this. How do we not be a jerk? What would it look like? And he's like, well, I guess I wouldn't tell him stuff that wasn't true. I wouldn't tell him we were going to be exclusive if we weren't. I would only date how many at a time. And it's like, out of that came what the book is talking about, where it says, in this way, we try to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. Let's just got to figure out, because otherwise we only know when we screw up. Come out of a deal and go, oh, that felt bad. I think I hurt her feelings, and it didn't feel good for me, and it didn't go all the way I wanted it to. So if we can establish some of this in advance, and it says whatever our ideal turns out to be, wait a minute. In this, we subjected each relation to this test. Was it selfish or not? Remember, because we're still looking for manifestations of self. We ask God, there's a prayer, to mold our ideals and help us live up to them. This is one of the many places in the book. Throughout the book, there are places where we ask God to show me what to do and then give me the strength to do it. It's a reasonable prayer when you think about it. There's a bunch of places in the book where it's going to say, show me what to do, and then give me the strength to do it.
And I'll tell you, one of the things that I think ends up happening in AA is, in the 5th step we'll talk more about, in the 3rd column of a 4-column inventory when doing the resentments, fears, and harms to others, is we'll begin to understand our old ideas. And I think our old ideas, one of the things I think tends to happen between men and women is we believe that men are the predators. And, how many of you guys have heard, that Bob over at the club has been hitting on the newcomer chicks, and how dare he do that, by golly. And I'm here to offer for your consideration that the women are the predators. It's not the boys that are the predators. we women have long since been running the show in this area. We have walked into some of the seediest and darkest places in the whole wide world, and trust me, we can handle one sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous that's trying to hit on us. But what ends up happening is you boys get all bowed up and you go, little lady, I'll take care of that for you. Bob, you listen to me. You stop hitting on our newcomers. And she's like, thank you. And what we've done is we've convinced you boys that we're helpless. And we've played you like a fiddle. It's really a shame. What I say is just walk that little gal over to someone like me, and I'll walk on over to Bob and tell Bob what he can do. You know what I mean? Oh. I have no problem telling any boy in AA what they, to back off. But it should be a woman doing it, not a boy, right? See, the girls all nod their heads. See, we've known this secret all along. Charlie says, we chase you till you catch us.
Right.
Yeah.
We chase you until you catch us.
We chase you till we let you catch us.
I chase you until you catch me.
Well, for you people on the tape, they're going to be going, oh my gosh, whatever.
Nocturnal.
Okay, but you know what? And thank you, darling. One of the things about that statement is it also happens with sponsorship. Girls will walk up to boys and say, I can't find any strong women. The line, there's not enough strong women in AA. And what we've done is we've convinced you to help us because we just need you. And it's such a crock, and for you women, I encourage you to become the strong one that shows everybody that we are strong women in AA. We are strong women and we can do this deal and we can lead the pack.
And for the guys, if the woman comes up and says, I don't like women, I don't trust women, and I just, and I think I need a male sponsor. I'm like, I understand completely. I'd like to introduce you to Katie. She'll sponsor you. You girls take it from here.
Yeah, they always get.
March them right over to that strong woman in AA.
The line that makes me
crazy. It doesn't matter if you don't trust women. That's an old idea.
Oh,
you don't
it's a terrible
hang
one.
on to it very long. But they'll come to us guys and go, none of the women have what you have. Would you please sponsor me? And I go, yes, ma'am, I will. And out comes my sword and my shield and my white stallion, and they fooled me. Where I needed to just go, I need to introduce you to so-and-so here.
So welcome over to the strong woman. And I think one of the things is that the reason for this is a big piece of the sex inventory. When we get with the opposite sex is when we are very crafty, right? I mean, we are very, very crafty individuals. We're not talking about the junior league here. We're talking about alcoholism. Right? The level of self-centeredness, the level of manipulation that I'll do to get what I need is whatever it takes, right? And then the other thing I wanted to touch on the page 70 is, it talks about when sex is very troublesome. Because to some people, and I think that this is something that's not talked enough about, and it's internet porn. I think that internet porn is a serious problem. And, you'll get with enough people that say, oh, men do it all the time. It's no big deal. And it's damaging and destroying relationships. It's robbing you of being intimate with the person you love. Call it what you want to call it. It's a bad deal out there, and it's very, very dangerous. And it tells me right here, so you don't have to actually be, having an actual sex relationship with someone. You can be robbing people in your own privacy of your own home. And what it says here is the second paragraph. It says, the first paragraph. Suppose we fall short on this chosen ideal and stumble. Now, this is something that behind pornography especially, I think it's important to look at its level of self-manifestation, its level of what is that feeding, what goes on with you that makes you need, to go to this level of whatever you're doing. It says, it's going through this whole deal that talks about, will we drink again? This is not always behind infidelity. And it says, to sum up about sex, we earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity, and for the strength to do the right thing. Right? If this is a problem, let's see if you can withdraw, right? If sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves harder into helping others. Remember, I told you, that is the thing that works the most. That's the most rewarding deal, is working with another alcoholic. And it's amazing how Charlie and I have talked a lot about this, and I said, this is one of these things that's very hard to touch from the podium. Traditionally, yes, it's men, but the women are terribly damaged behind it, and the men are equally as damaged behind it, believe it or not. What it does is, it to me goes out there like veins as to what it robs us of. And we alcoholics will shove anything into that hole, that black hole. We'll shove having more kids. We'll shove spending money. We'll shove pornography. Anything we can, and miss getting that connection with the God of our understanding. And believe it or not, He can remove all that. He can absolutely remove all that.
When you get into a situation like this sex prayer on page 70, I've done it myself, and I've had people carry around a card with the sex prayer on it. And it's just to sum up about sex. There's 4 prayers there. We earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity, and for the strength to do the right thing. If somebody's having trouble in this area, they can carry these 4 things to pray about on a 3x5 card and have it on the dashboard, have it in their back pocket. Saying these prayers, going to God with this stuff, has amazing results. And then it talks about if you're getting, because when it says, we pray for the right ideal, that's what we're trying to shape up anyway, for guidance in each questionable situation. I tell my guys, the time to pray for guidance in each questionable situation is not when you're in the hotel room, with the married chick, or, you're sitting in front of the computer, or, whatever the problem happens to be. It's got to be in advance. I got to get prayed up in advance for that thing, because I can't, expect God to come down and jerk me out of the room and throw me down the street. I've got to be praying in advance for this stuff. And so I'm going to roll past this because we still got a lot of ground to cover. But it says, if we've been thorough about our personal inventory, we've written down a lot. Now listen, see if this sounds like we've covered every possible thing that we could ever inventory, or does it sound like we've started on this process? We've written down a lot. Not everything possible. We've written down a lot. We have listed and analyzed our resentments. We have begun to comprehend their futility and their fatality. We have commenced, that means begun, to see their terrible destructiveness. We have begun to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill towards all men, even our enemies. This is part of that sick man prayer, for we look on them as sick people. We have listed the people we have hurt by our conduct, and we're willing to straighten out the past if we can. In this book, you read again and again that faith did for us what we could not do for ourselves. For the guy that missed the self piece, what happened when I read this line? We hope you are convinced now that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from Him. What? We hope you're convinced now that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from Him. If you've already made a decision and an inventory of your grosser handicaps, you've made a good beginning. That being so, you've swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about yourself. So see how remember when we said that the 4th step is going to be a consideration of the common manifestations of self? Does that make you look at it a little differently? Mm-hmm. That the problem really is selfishness and self-centeredness. It's the root of my problem. Back on page 13, I believe it's 13 or 15 in Bill's story, he talks about when he did his 5th step with Ebby, he says, I ruthlessly faced my sins and became willing to have my newfound friend take them away root and branch. I've not had a drink since. The difference between root and branch is because, and with me, these defects, for a lot of us, I'm going to the meetings and I'm talking about it, and I'm just trimming the branches. I'm dealing with the little things that are poking me in the eye. We're going to cut off, the problem in traffic, and the problem with the boss, and the problem with the kids, and the problem with the porn, and the problem with the money, and, that can keep me busy. But I'm never addressing the root of my problem. And I need to go to these meetings under that condition because I need some relief. And what happens is I get just enough relief from that meeting to get through the day, and then I go back out living a life based completely on self-will. And by 5:30 tomorrow evening, I need a meeting again because I need relief again. But I never experience freedom because we've never addressed the root of the problem. See how the focus of the work changes? Now we're looking at reduction of self. Right?
Yeah. So,
into action.
Into action, yeah. So now we're just going to sum up the fifth step. One of the things I think that is so wonderful in the fifth step, it says, page 74, first paragraph down, the paragraph that starts with, if we cannot or would rather not do this, blah, 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 blah. It says the rule is, at the very bottom of that paragraph, it says the rule is we must be hard on ourselves. One of the things that I think is another disservice that tends to happen is we're afraid of hurting somebody's feelings. When in fact, this is not, I tell you, I sit people down and say, let me tell you something. My job here is to tell you what you don't want to hear. I'm not going to soft sell it. I'm not going to try to make it so that you can handle hearing it. Please disregard your emotions as best you can when I do this inventory process, because I got a limited amount of time for you to see the things that are killing you. And when it comes to me sharing them with you, I don't want to try to just come at you, with, well, don't take this the wrong way. You know what I mean? Are you kind of with me on that? I mean, I'm getting ready. It says we're going to swallow and digest large chunks of truth. That's not going to feel very good. And so when we sit down, the thing I love is, this is how I do it. And once again, it's perceived however you want to do it. But I have you read the person's name and just the second column. And then I go on what I call the fact-finding mission. So the 19 words that Mr. Brown got, I'm going to go on a fact-finding mission. I'm going to go on how long have you been married? How long have you had this mistress? How long has Brown wanted your job? Are you a good employee at your work? I'm going to just ask enough questions till God works through me and puts that picture right there. How many of you guys have listened to a lot of inventory, and all of a sudden you feel God's presence just come straight through you? Mm-hmm. And it is, it'll even shake your own ground. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you'll find yourself saying stuff that you've never said before.
Yeah, and I'll go, wow, that was amazing. Mm-hmm. And so, but you've got to get on that fact-finding mission, because you have got to get this picture. I'm delusional. Don't lose sight of that. What I just told you is a delusional lie that I believe. And so I've got to ask enough questions. And Roy's story was perfect. My dad's, remarrying all those women, all that. And so, so the thing that is so helpful is when we're willing to look at this from an entirely different angle. This is not your part. We have got to stay away from that term, because that would assume somebody else has a part in this. We're to disregard the other man entirely. It's all about me. And that's where, it says a solitary self-appraisal be insufficient. I can't remember, Charlie and I were having an argument, and I said, well, did you take that to your sponsor? Some people are real, in the marriage, they're like, you said that? It's like, I damn sure did. I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm going to ask him if he took that to his sponsor, Don't
call her Scrappy for nothing.
I said, did you? And he's got the right to say it to me, too, And I said, did you take that to your sponsor? He goes, no, I looked at it. And I go, a solitary self-appraisal, we seem insufficient.
Yeah.
And it's like, Charlie, we got to be so careful in that. Well,
and that comes up with my sponsor sometimes. If I'm not careful, and Dana and I were talking about this earlier, whether my sponsor is cross-town or cross-country, a lot of times what I'm going to take to that sponsor are the things out of a situation at work or in my relationship that I find relevant. So if the sponsor's not going on that, if you go on that fact-finding or fact-facing mission with me, I'm going to step on my tail in pretty short order,
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, because I'll come and say, I didn't do anything, and they're accusing me of cheating on my miles at work, and I don't know why. I'm supporting the whole country, and then, and then they came in and they said that, they used MapQuest, and I'm off by 25 miles a day, and I don't use, you're like, oh, the story's already too long. I can tell it's bullshit.
Yeah.
Because we have to shape up. And Mark used to say you can ask an alcoholic if they're married, and you'll get a 5-minute answer. And he's like, that's a yes or no question. Were you or were you not cheating on your miles at work? Well, yes or no. Well, yes, okay, technically, I guess yes, but I really would like to tell the whole story, but you see how when you go on that fact-facing mission, you find the story shaping up where all of a sudden you're going, I think you might be a little delusional about your role in this thing. And I really don't believe that the sponsor's role in a fifth step is just to sit and let the guy read his fourth step. Because that's still, and for my money, a solitary self-appraisal. He's just sitting there listening to me read what my take is on it. And listen what it says, because it gives the requirements that it says it's important that this guy be able to keep the confidence. This is the bottom of page 74. That he fully understand and approve what I'm driving at, and that he will not change my plan. And it says, when we decide who's to hear our story, we have a written inventory, and we're prepared for a long talk. We explain to our partner what we're about to do, and why we have to do it. What are we about to do? We're about to try to face and be rid of the things in ourselves that are blocking me from this power. Mm-hmm. That's what we're trying to do. If I had to explain to somebody what I do, I go, I got to get close to this power, and these are the things, the way the book lines it out, that I think are blocking me.
Okay, now let me jump in here and finish my train of thought on this, listening to this inventory. The other thing that Mark used to say, he says, some people say, I take this stuff very seriously, and it says he should realize that he is engaging upon a life or death errand. That's how crucial this stuff is. We're not talking about a self-help program. We're talking about people living and dying in AA. Can we have a ball? Absolutely. But at the same time, man, I take this. My husband didn't make it. He did not make it. I'm not blaming anybody. But this is serious stuff, when it hits you that hard. So when I'm on this,
like they're going to get it eventually, and a lot of us don't.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that don't make it.
Yeah.
And so when you're doing that fact-finding mission, so you're getting all this information, and then we go into the third column. I like to do a little bit more of an expanded third column where I take the words of still the language of the book, but it says when we sex relationships, self-esteem, pride, personal relationships, security, I take those and I want you to tell me how you see yourself. So when you say your self-esteem was affected, how do you see yourself in this relationship? I'm a great wife. I'm a loving mother. I'm a good sister, right? That's your self-esteem. When it says your pride is how you think others see you. They think I'm needy. They think I'm not worthy of raising my own children. Then you go to ambitions is what you want. Security is what you need, right, to make these things be okay. Then it says personal relationships are your deep-seated old beliefs, old ideas. In We Agnostics, it talks about prejudice. I've always believed the word prejudice was against race. That's just simple-minded Katie. That's all it was. Against religion, Catholics, Jewish, whatever. That's what I thought prejudice meant. I had no idea that it means prejudgment. So it's my old ideas are what I think about Katie. Men make more money than women. Men are stronger than women. Men can be police officers and do heavy duty work. Women can't. You name it. The children should be with the mother. Can you see the old ideas? Women must remain attractive all their lives. Men can, be overweight and balding and no problem. As long as they have money. Men are you know what I'm saying? This is my old ideas. This is what I live on. This is what drives Katie. It says we had to get rid of our old ideas. They were nil until let go absolutely, or, paraphrasing on how that is. That's what that third column is, guys, is what is it about Katie that makes these old ideas come alive? What is it that's killing Katie behind my belief system, my old ideas, my preconceived notions of life? And then, of course, it goes into that fourth column, which is the part of selfish, self-centered, and self-seeking. Once again, I need to go down in self-seeking, and I need to see what were my actions in self-seeking that caused these problems. I've got to get down to the causes and conditions, man. So I've got something to take to God in 6 and 7.
Prejudice here, I looked it up for you, says
We're almost done.
I know. Prejudice says previous and unfavorable bias, prejudgment without due examination.
Now,
Wait.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So
he wanted to share. I'm telling you, Glenn, you'll have to tell us what you think about this.
I can't edit this.
No, I tell you. Charlie goes, let's share this stuff.
I love going back and
Share?
forth, but that implies going back and forth.
Okay.
So so now we're doing this fifth step with this guy, and it's funny, there's really not a lot of instructions in the book on how to hear a fifth step. It tells me how to write a fourth step, but now listen what it says. After it talks about, who to pick, what spirit to take into it, and that sort of thing, it basically says, we pocket our pride and go to it, illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Those are really all the instructions for hearing a fifth step. But I called up a friend of mine one time, and I said, Scott, I'm a bit of a technician. I've studied this book, and I'm very adamant about doing it the way the book lays it out to do it. I said, and I've seen the instructions on how to do a resentment inventory, and how to do a fear inventory, and what to take from that fear inventory, and how to do a sex inventory, and what to look for, and the 9 questions to ask, and that sort of thing. I said, where is the piece where it says, what's the worst thing you've ever done? Because how many of you heard that in the rooms of AA about what's the worst thing you've ever done? And he said, well, it's in the fifth step. It's in the fifth step. It says, first of all, illuminating means to shine light upon. Illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. So obviously, hearing a fifth step is not just listening to a recitation of their fourth step. I'm supposed to get in there and say, what is every dark cranny in the past? Are there any twists of character that didn't make that? Because I can't tell you how many times. And when you're hearing inventory, by now, if I'm through the work and I'm up in 10, 11, and 12, it implies that I'm going to have intuitive thought and that God's going to speak to me. And that if I'm unblocked, it says we come to rely upon it. It calls it an essential sixth sense, this intuitive thought. Well, I tell you, it shows up when you're hearing inventory. Because you'll be hearing inventory with a guy, and there's a part of me that thinks, he's not bringing it. I can tell when the guy sits down sometimes. This guy's already made up his mind what he's not going to tell me. And we'll sit down and we'll start going, and we'll get to the end, and with one of my favorite guys, we're hearing inventory, and he'd read everything, and I said, is that everything? And he goes, yeah, that's everything. I said, really? Because, the book talks about we hang on to some of the worst things from our past. We hang on to the worst items in stock, and those are the things that block us the most. Do you have anything else you want to talk about? And he goes, no, not really. I said, because I know for me, in my story, I had a lot of shame about, this and that, that happened. And he goes, okay, there's something else. And I said, okay, now comes that, and when that one didn't kill him, he goes, and there's something else, and sometimes you can draw that out of a person, but when it says illuminating that to me are those places where we talk about what are the things that you're going to take to your grave and you're never going to tell anybody. And there's a lot of reasons to bring most of the stuff in my inventory, but you remember when we said that this process is driven by my first step experience? There's only one thing that's going to make me tell everything, and it's the fact that if I don't feel like if I get unblocked, I'm going to drink again. I'm going to get uncomfortable enough that if I don't bring it, that eventually I'm going to drink again. And that's when I'm going to go, okay, I don't want to talk about this stuff, but I don't want to drink vodka. So here's what happened.
Now I have to jump into this because we only have about 9 minutes left. Okay, it says, once we've taken this step, withholding nothing, which is what Charlie's talking about, the deepest, darkest secrets, we are delighted. Now remember I said there's 2 places that it talks about that we are to get rid of this promptly and without regret, yes? And then it says we will be delighted. That promise right there tells me we're to uncover, discover, and discard. Not uncover, discover, and rub it on ourselves, right? I'm telling you, that self-pity, you watch yourself. When all of a sudden you see things from an entirely different angle, you are ashamed at yourself.
I had a sponsor, he called me on the way home one time, and he goes, I'm not delighted. He said, I feel like we just spent 3.5 hours with you pointing out all the ways that I'm selfish and self-centered, and this and that. I was like, That's when we had to talk about that thing about promptly and without regret. Don't turn this into
self-pity.
Self-pity, because that's just another manifestation. So,
and then what it says here, it says, we can look the world in the eye. These are the 5th step promises. We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. You've got to see how many times the book says be alone at perfect peace and ease. That, to me, is the comfort that we took when we took the drink. The very first drink was the peace and ease. Yes, that's what we wanted. I mean, how many of you guys just went, all I need is one drink, man. I just want one drink. Unfortunately, we trigger an allergy. So we don't get just one drink or 2 drinks to take off the edge.
It's interesting to point out here that it doesn't say we've finally got enough information now to manage our fears. It says our fears fall from us.
Mm-hmm. It says we begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. We have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. That right there is, why would you want anyone to take a year to do inventory? It, to me, is absolutely insane. I'm taking a risk. We were just talking about this, John, right? John and I were just talking about this. That has become the norm. If that was your experience, you're passing on your experience, and I say shame on you. Read the book. The book does not say that. Why in the world do we want to risk somebody's life on because it worked for me? We should do an inventory and do it quickly. It's what the book reflects. Bill and Bob were all doing it fast. And all of a sudden, the semantics, we lose the semantics, and my children's children are not going to have, this is going to be the AA program, take what you like and leave the rest, right? And so that's what I'm saying is there is... There is, I get very, very passionate in this, because you can tell.
We got 5 minutes. I'm going to bring it home here. This is the back and forth, honey.
I am going to vote. Glenn, I need your help here to tell him this back and forth is a bad plan.
I just want to say one quick thing here. I love the back and forth. Now that we've done this inventory with something, it says returning home. We find a place where we can be quiet for an hour. I tell you, that kitchen table AA that we do at my house on Thursday night, one time Mark went off on a rant about the hour after the 5th step. When we talk about listening to the CDs, because you can't take in sometimes everything you're trying to hear, I'll never forget, Chad was sitting there at that table. He kept looking at me and looking at Mark, and he was looking at me like, are you getting this? And he told me later, he goes, that talk that Mark did on the hour after the 5th step, he said, I think I got about 10% of what he said, and that 10% revolutionized that hour for me. Mm-hmm. I mean, before I would have said, just go home and hang out for an hour and think about what we've done. But Mark was like, man, he goes, when you go home, it says, we thank God from the bottom of our heart. That's a prayer that we know Him better. Taking this book down from the shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals, we consider them in all of their implications. Do I believe I have a hopeless condition of mind and body? Do I believe in the absence of a spiritual experience that I will get loaded again? Do I believe that this power can take care of all the problems in my life? And do I believe that if I'll get out of the way, He'll take care of me if I stay close to Him and perform His work well? Have I gone in this inventory and removed the stuff that's blocking me? Did I talk to somebody else about it? Am I holding anything back? Is this power going to take me? And that's the stuff we go home, we spend an hour in, and it talks about, have we omitted anything? For we're building an arch through which we shall walk a free man, as our work solid. So when it talks about that arch, and then it rolls into 6 and 7. The first time I did 6 and 7, and we got, what do we got?
We can bring 6 and 7 into 8 and 9. We're going to bring 6
and 7 in and into 8 and 9. We keep pushing it back. But I mean, can you see how much depth can come out of this inventory and the 5th step process? I didn't want to just glaze over it.
No, as a matter of fact, that is, and remember the hour when you go home, the hour is the 5th steps. Remember how important the semantics are. The hour is not 6 and 7.
It's part of the 5th step.
It's part of the 5th step. And I'm sorry I said shame on you. I know that's a somewhat inflammatory statement. So,
that was the public 10th step.
That was. I'm sorry. That's that if that's how you do it, fine. But what? But here's the deal. The importance, guys, is I am so big on the semantics. So that hour is you need to let them know that they need to go over that. They need to read a little bit out of We Agnostics. They need to thank God from the bottom of their heart. They need to look at the allergy. Do they really believe they've got all these things? And then when they go through 60 to 63, then all of a sudden they're looking at their 4-step. Have they omitted anything? Did what Charlie said. Then we go into 6, and you literally answer the questions in 6 and say the prayer in 7. But that's what we're going to talk about that when we come back. But that's what I'm saying is that hour is not all of that and more. And so
that would be the 4th and the 5th step there. We're going to take a 15-minute break, and we're going to come back at 5 minutes after 4, and we're going to finish
6, 7, 8, and 9.
6, 7, 8, and 9, and then we're going to have a wonderful dinner. Thanks for hanging in there, everybody. Y'all are doing a great job.
Yeah. Oh, I do not like